Morning, folks. Morning, folks. Councilman Rasmussen here. Something just glitched on the service, so I may have just said that twice. Coming to you with my update from our Smyrna Town Council meeting last night, so Monday, December 16th. This is our last formal Town Council meeting of the year, and since we don't have anything weird or special going on, no special meetings or anything like that in the works, it was all most likely our last council meeting of the year. First, just start off the normal updates. As always, make sure you're getting the town tidbits. There's a lot of stuff in there. The town staff started putting in sort of a little like info sections in that last week with just some basic information, kind of reminders about how things work as far as the town is concerned. One big thing to note: so at this point, yard waste collection has stopped for the year. Last week was the last week. We will see a new, or we'll see Christmas tree collection, that sort of stuff picking up, but we won't be yard waste collecting again until the spring. I'll let you know when that's getting ready to start. It does start to feel a little bit like winter, though today it's like 60 some degrees and raining. So who knows? Another thing to note is starting this week, hydrant flushing is going on. So it's mostly done at night. I think it's running like 10 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that when they're doing, I'm sorry, I'm looking it up right now. 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The town staff is doing hydrant flushing. So every year we need to go around and flush out all or most of the fire hydrants just to make sure everything is working correctly. Sometimes, because it does allow lots of water to pass through the lines, sometimes it does create a little bit of browning to the water. So if you notice that in the morning, don't be surprised. It's something that's going on because of the hydrant flushing. Just run your tap for a little while. It'll move through the system and you should be good to go. So, but you'll be seeing that around town for the next couple of days. Always lots of stuff in the town tidbits, lots of the events going on. It's the holiday season in full swing, so there are lots of things going on. Hopefully you're out there participating in as many of those as you care to. We've had a couple of big town events. Last week was our Veterans Day event that was very, very well attended. It was a wonderful event. So thank you to everybody who came out. Thank you to Councilman Gott for putting that on. There were a couple of other events. We were out of town for Sunday, so I didn't go to the caroling event, but I did see some of the videos and pictures from Town Hall, and that looked like a good time as well. So hopefully there's fun stuff for you and your families to find and try over the holiday season here. As far as the council meeting last night, it was actually a pretty quick meeting. We had a bunch of different items on it, but many of them are relatively procedural items, so there wasn't a lot of discussion going on as part of it. The one sort of big, on old business, we've had a number of conversations about economic development incentives. I've brought this up a number of times. Specifically, the one thing that we are discussing and looking at is whether or not to apply an additional impact fee waiver in the industrial parks, basically. We have really 2 industrial parks in town, 3 if you count Walmart, the distribution center. There's the Duck Creek Business Campus and the Smyrna Business Park. The Smyrna Business Park is pretty much built out at this point. There's very little construction or anything going on over there. But the Duck Creek Business Campus, owned by KRM, that is the big industrial park. We've seen a couple of good-sized buildings go in there, and the potential for a lot more industrial warehouse sort of space going in that area. The conversation has been, when we increased our fire and ambulance impact fees, they went from being very, very low to, especially when applied to industrial projects, incredibly high. For most of the growth in the town was likely to be residential, and our impact fees for that we don't want to mess around with because those have a high demand on the system. The question here is whether or not having very, very high impact fees, and what we're talking about is in the order of magnitude of could be hundreds of thousands of dollars more to build a similar building in Smyrna than in a neighboring municipality. is it going to stop or prevent some sort of economic development activity? We want to see those business parks full. They will generate tax revenue. They will create jobs in our community. There is a long tail to what investment in business parks can do for our community. The more we grow our tax base through commercial and industrial uses, the less the individual tax burden needs to be on citizens, because we are spreading out that tax burden over much larger areas. The question is how do you get that sort of development? And it is a highly competitive market to get industrial or commercial users to locate in these areas. You can see up in Newcastle or Middletown, there have been a number of different larger facilities being built. We've seen a couple down in Dover, but we really haven't seen a lot going on, and yet we have one of these large business parks. There's a ton of factors that go into why that is the case, but one of them, if you meet all of the other qualifications, is, are you economically competitive? And when we instituted the new impact fees, when we did our impact fee study, it would make us pretty much the most expensive place in the state to build. And the question is that a great idea for long-term economic development? So we've been talking about this for a while. There's obvious needs for our fire and ambulance departments there. As the town grows, they need the ability to build more substations, to buy the major equipment, all of the things that are necessary to provide high levels of service to our community, and they need money to do it. So we want to make sure that this is balancing act of making sure that the fire and ambulance systems can get, or departments can get, as much money as possible from impact fees, yet at the same time not have those stand in the way of some sort of economic development thing that can have a very outsized positive impact on the community. We reached out to the fire service and the ambulance service to get their opinion on a proposal that we create a sliding scale fee waiver for the fire and ambulance impact fees only for the industrial research park area. Both the fire and ambulance station came back and said that they would not oppose it. They obviously know that they want to get as much money as possible. I think there's also a recognition that economic development is an important thing for our town, and nobody wants to be seen as the one standing in the way of something like that. So it's been a lot of back and forth in trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We're balancing some very very important and competing interests in this circumstance. So we talked about it back and forth, and what we've come to is the town solicitor is going to draft either it's going to be a code change or a resolution, depending on what's absolutely necessary, but it's going to come back to the town council to propose a 50% fee waiver. It's a sliding scale, so the more money you spend, the more percentage of a waiver you get. You could get up to 50% of the fire and ambulance impact fees. We already actually offer that in the IORP zone for our other municipal impact fees. So like the police impact fee, the parks impact fee, the municipal buildings impact fee, those areas. This would be extending it to fire and ambulance. So we'll see an actual resolution for that. There's no action that's been actually taken by council yet. It's been more information gathering and discussion, and we'll see an actual code amendment or resolution proposed for that at the first meeting in January. So we had more discussion on that. We had the second reading and the second vote on 3 ordinances. These all had the first reading at the last meeting. The first one, which is ordinance 17-24, extends our property tax exemption to disabled individuals, as well as increases the income requirement or the income threshold to qualify for the tax exemption. Like most other places around, we offer some sort of a tax abatement for people over the age of 65 that are below a certain level of income. The town of Smyrna actually has, as I've determined, and from my research looking around, could be wrong, but everything I found, so we offer pretty much the most generous one out there. and we had one of the highest income thresholds. But as we see the income threshold in our community continue to go up, and the costs of living continue to go up, we decided to increase the income threshold. Previously, you had to be below $30,000 if you were an individual, and below $35,000 if you were a married couple. This is not including Social Security. So to be clear, this is not, all income whatsoever. This is any income in addition to any federal Social Security or railroad pensions or military benefits, things like that. So this proposal ups that to $35,000 for an individual, $40,000 for a married couple, and it also adds people who are on permanent disability. This is one of the things that many other communities have had in their exemption program, but Smyrna has not. So we're kind of follow along with what other people have done, add on those individuals on permanent disability, and we're going to utilize the system that Kent County uses to determine that eligibility. So we're pretty much just kind of falling in line with some of the other folks. So we will continue to have the most generous tax exemption system in the state as we move forward with this, and even more people will be able to be included in it. So I think that's an important addition, and I'm glad to see that moving forward in our community. So that was the second reading of Ordinance 17-24. We also had the second reading of Ordinance 18-24. This is one that requires rental licenses and rental inspections to get a certificate of occupancy for rental units occupied even by family members. That's the big change here. We always require that if you're going to rent out a piece of property, but there had been an exemption if that piece of property was being rented by someone who is in your family. Unfortunately, we have bad landlords in our town, and sometimes they have family members living in homes that wouldn't meet the codes that are required by that. And it creates problems within families, and it creates problems when the town gets called because of an issue between a family member and a railing that's falling over or something that's unsafe, leaking pipes. It is sad that these things happen, but they certainly do. And so because of that, we are extending that rental inspection and certification process to all rentals in the town, whether you're renting to a family member or not. The only exemption that's going to exist by that is if the property owner physically lives on the property or in the house. So if you're, there are some of those instances where that's the case. So this is the second reading of that. It'll come back one more time in January for a final reading. The third reading, the third ordinance, number 19-24, this one clarifies the exemptions and prohibitions about animals living in town. Chickens. Really, let's be honest. This is about chickens. That we have always had a prohibition that has existed in code for a very long time. You are not allowed to have chickens. You are not allowed to have ducks. You are not allowed to have any sort of farm animals living in town. We all know that there are chickens in town. If you drive down Main Street, some days you see them pecking around on the sidewalk on the down towards Lake Como. Unfortunately, again, right, people who are bad actors, people who don't care about their chickens running around, people who have roosters who crow first thing in the morning, those are ways that you annoy your neighbors, and eventually we get to a point where we have to do something about this. I wish everybody just did the right thing all the time and was respectful of their neighbors, and boy, there'd be a lot fewer ordinances and a lot less work for us to do. But in this case, again, we have people who are creating problems because of their desire to have farm animals in town and not control them. And we have to begin much more strictly enforcing the ordinance. The ordinance has been in place, but it has not been as strictly enforced as it should have been. And so in order to more strictly enforce that, and knowing that if you happen to have a bunch of ducks and chickens, it's not the kind of thing that you can just toss in the garbage tomorrow, we've set a date from when this is enacted that we're giving people basically a warning, and after a certain date, it's going to be a crackdown on this in town. So that was the third reading of that. We'll see that one more time in January. We had another vote. This one is a reclassification. So the Public Safety Committee, which exists in town, there is a requirement that the town have what's called a police accountability board. This was put in place by House Bill 206 in 2013, and we need to come into compliance with that state requirement. So what we are doing, same thing many communities are doing, we are changing our public safety committee into a police accountability board. There are some requirements around the membership for that board. There needs to be a member of clergy. There needs to be somebody who has experience with or has been adjudicated by the criminal justice system, and other members of the community, the police chief, town council members, stuff like that, all have to be involved. So we had the vote to reclassify the public safety committee to the police accountability board. At our next meeting, we will approve the initial members of that board. Most of them have already been asked and have agreed to participate. So that'll sort of just be a more formal approval process. But again, this is basically to bring us in line with the requirement of House Bill 206 back in 2023. We had a couple more old business items, things that have come up, conversations about term limits for mayor and council and the selection process for the vice mayor. Both of those have been referred to the Charter Review Committee. They're going to talk about those more because those are things that would require charter changes or charter ordinance changes, so they're going to have that as a discussion. New business, I already mentioned the members of the Police Accountability Board. We'll actually formally approve that. The big new business item that we had was the reallocation of budgeting for our ARPA funds. So ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, allocated funding to lots of municipalities around the country to help offset some of the impacts associated with the pandemic. The town of Smyrna, we ended up getting $6.377 million in ARPA funds. Now, ARPA funds have requirements about how they could be used and when they needed to be used by. Now, because we received less than $10 million and we're a community under 25,000 people, we actually had a lot more flexibility in how we used those ARPA funds. The federal government wants us, and we have to report on this every year, but we're the lowest level of reporting information that they require. Even so, we've done a lot of tracking for this. I think we could have taken the easy way. I think they called it lost revenue or revenue replacement. Some communities just took their whole thing, put it into revenue replacement, dumped it into their general fund, and just kind of operated like that. The town of Smyrna decided to use this to do a lot of capital projects. So most of this money, the vast majority of it, went into knocking off a bunch of little capital projects that we have, as well as putting some solid investments in some of the engineering costs for a few of our bigger projects that we have coming down the pipe. The vast majority of this has been completed. Right now, we've spent about $5.4 million of that. There's about $976,000 still outstanding. By the time we actually get to the end of the year, it'll be closer to $850,000 that will have not been spent yet. But the requirement from the federal government is that by the end of 2024, December 31st, all of the money either needs to be spent or allocated to specific projects. So ours has always been allocated. We've no. As of the beginning of this year, we've had 100% allocation for ours. Now, we've had a couple of projects that went a little bit over budget, and we have some projects that are under budget that were on our list. So what we did last night was a reallocation of those funds. Some of the places that were under budget, we moved that funding over and closed out some of the projects that were over budget. And it still leaves a couple of projects in the works. Really, the biggest one that we've got out there is our second, our new water treatment plant. That is a very, very long-term project. We're working on it. Selecting the location is really where we're at right now. It's going to be many years to actually build it out. It's a many $million-dollar project, but utilizing those ARPA funds to do a lot of the required groundwater testing, all of those type of things is where we've been. Some of that work is still going on. So we wanted to reallocate some additional funds to that. Overall, we're in compliance with what we need to be doing for ARPA. All of the money is allocated. The places where we have it allocated, we know that we can spend the rest of it. And we need to expend all of the money by the end of 2026. So we have a little bit of time. The way things are tracking, ours will all be expended pretty much by the end of 2025, it looks like. So as all those projects want to close out. But we need to make sure that we're in compliance, and so all of our funds are allocated, and they'll be reporting. The town staff will be doing the ARPA annual report that needs to make sure it shows that all of that's allocated. So overall, that's moving forward. It's been nice to have some of those. We've closed out a lot of small projects. Some of these were things that we would have either needed to do anyway, and it was nice that we didn't have to budget to do it, or things that were nice to do's but weren't high on the list but could qualify for it. But in the end, it's one-time money, and we used it for one-time expenses rather than trying to do things that might encumber the town with larger costs down the road. So that final reallocation was approved, and that moved forward. And that was pretty much it. It was a pretty short meeting. I think we were done in like 52 minutes or something like that. So obviously, and as always, if there's any questions or comments or things, please reach out to me. Always happy to help if I can. Happy holidays to everybody. And we'll see you. Our first meeting of the year is going to be January 6th. So if I don't see or hear from you before then, you'll hear from me after January 6th. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.